So in this video I'm going to show you how to use the XRite Color Checker Passport video and Davinci Resolve 16 to convert log footage to something more like Rec. 709. Now I prefer to shoot most of my videos in a logarithmic color space because I'm able to retain the higher dynamic range. I'm able to maintain details in the shadows and the highlights. However, when you edit your video, you should then convert it to more of a standard dynamic range color space such as Rec. 709. And in this video I'm going to show you how to do several things. Number one is we're going to use the contrast swatches of the color checker to figure out what the log curve is, the logarithmic curve is, and match it to Rec. 709. Number two, I'm going to also calibrate the colors of the cameras to neutralize its color science so that it matches reality much closer. And this can also be used to match other cameras as well. So that's very useful. Number three, we're going to take all of the work that we've done and bake it into a LUT. So we're going to create a lookup table. And number four, I will show you how to apply that LUT to your footage that you've shot with the appropriate white balance, and then be able to do things such as control exposure in log space and be able to see that in Rec. 709. So I'm not going to assume that you're a beginner with Davinci Resolve, but I will cover some of the hotkeys and a couple tips along the way. So let's get started. Alright, so here in the edit page you can see that I've shot some footage with the Panasonic GH5 camera using the Like 709 color profile, and this is the profile that I would like my vlog footage shot here to match to. So this is vlog L and this is Like 709. I'm going to press Shift D to unbypass my node grades. So this is now vlog L matching Like 709 quite well. So let's go to the color page and see how I did this. Alright, so on the color page here you can see that I have generated a curve that matches the Like 709 color profile quite well. So, what I'm going to do is, before we get to that, before I show you how to actually do that, I just want to mention that the profile that you want to match to, you need to make sure that your white balance is correct. So, first, I've generated some markers on the footage. You can press M to add a marker to your footage. You can also press the N button, the N hotkey, to toggle snapping on or off. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and create a mask, or what Davinci Resolve calls a power window. I'm going to isolate that, pressing Shift H, or highlight it, and we'll bring out the waveform monitor, and you can see that the white balance, although I did set the white balance when I recorded this, you can see the white balance up at the top here is not quite good. So we need to do a minor adjustment here. I think that's quite a bit better. Now you can also, because this is supposed to be Like 709, this swatch is supposed to represent your darkest point in the video, and this swatch is supposed to represent the brightest point. So you could bring down, using curves, your colors, but your shades, your contrast. But I'm not going to bother with that on this. I like that contrast. I'm going to leave it alone. So with that, let's go ahead, and I'm going to then. You can also, before we do the blinking thing that I'm about to do, I want to show you that you could, on the edit page, use pitch and yaw here in the inspector. You can get these lines much closer to more straight edges. But I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to leave it like this. And I'm going to go to the blinking section here. And we're going to make sure that we are on our marker that we've created. And mask out this so that we can just focus on the contrast swatches. Okay. So now I'm going to right click and grab steel, and then I'm going to go back to the vlog one, make sure I click on my marker that I made, and if I double click this, I'm then able to see what's going on. I got to make sure that highlight is off, so this button up here. So you can see now that yes, they do match very well. Now if I press Shift D to unbypass the grades, you can see that yeah, this is the vlog L and this is the Like 709. You can see once I turn the nodes back on, they match quite well. So let's go ahead and disable the nodes, and let's take a look at that vlog to 709. What did I do? You can see the curve right here that I've created. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to reset the grades and nodes, and I'm going to create the curve right now. So let's bring up the waveform monitor, and you can see that if I go back to the image wipe, you can see that all we're going to do is use the curves here to try to get the V-Log L footage to match the Rec. 709 shot. So I'm going to go up to the top, and this will require a few minutes of creating points in the curve and moving the image wipe to be able to then create the log curve. Alright, so with that I'm going to say that the log curve has been approximated reasonably well. Alright, so now we're going to rename this node Vlog to 709. I'm going to press Control C to copy it. I'm going to go over to my timeline and I'm going to look at this clip right here. Now this right here was shot in different conditions in daylight, and first I set my white balance using this portion of the color checker, and then I shot this. So you can see over here, these are the nodes that I created, but I'm going to go ahead and reset this right now and start over. So step one would be to then paste your Vlog to 709 curve. So you see what I just did? If I go to the curves, I've already created the curve. I'll go ahead and bring up the waveform monitor so you can see that. Now the next step of the procedure would then be to affect contrast. Now you might think we've already done contrast, but I need to do it again to make sure, before I affect colors, I need to make sure my contrast is correct, or at least matches what I did before in order to get this result. So I'm going to go ahead and press Alt-S to create a new node, and I'm going to call this contrast. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to make sure that I'm at the right location on my timeline. Yes, I am. And I'm going to create a mask here. Now you might be thinking that I could just generate a mask around the whole thing, but I don't want to because I'm concerned about this portion here. This very glossy black level is probably not giving an accurate reading. So I'm going to go ahead and just skip that. And I'm going to use this one right here, which is the next best one. So let's press Shift H to highlight our selection or our mask. And what I'm going to do is go over to the curves here, or we can just use offset and gain. It really doesn't matter, but I guess I'll use the curve here, but we'll just use offset and gain. It's fine. So let's go and bring this down to about right there, bring the gain up. And now you can see, I believe we should have the gain just about right there, the offset about right here, and I think that's fine. So let's go and check that with what we had over here. It was about right there. And then when we look at this, you can see our mask. I just want to make sure that the levels are equal. So let's get rid of that black swatch there. And you can see that it should begin about just above the 128 line, and it should end near the middle of the last. So let's go ahead and make sure that that happens. Let's go back over to the edit page and make sure that our contrast is done properly. So we're just going to use offset. We're going to make sure it starts about right there and then ends about in the middle there. Okay, so that's much better. Now that we've got our contrast done, we're going to add a new node, Alt-S. So I'm going to name this one WB Wheels. Now you can do your white balance in several methods. You can use the temperature here, which I think is not quite precise enough for this. You can also use the wheels, and you can also use the curves, which give the most control. But I'm going to go ahead and use the wheels because it's kind of a middle method. It's not too complicated. So we're going to select all of these again, except the one on the bottom. And I'm simply going to affect white balance. So we can see at the top our white balance looks pretty good, but at the bottom we're going to affect our lift here and fix that white balance. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be improved just a little bit. And now you can see that the white balance has been improved significantly. If I press Control D to toggle that node on or off, you can see the result. We're going to press Shift F to go full screen, press Shift C to then maximize the view here, Control D again, so you can see. Alright, so the white balance has been fixed, and the next step is we're going to do the color calibration. So press Alt S to make a new node. I'm going to say CC HVH, so hue versus hue. Alright, so over here I'm going to select all of these. Now the top ones are 50% saturation for various colors along the hues, and the bottom one here is skin tones. So I'm going to go to the vector scope and bring it out. So vector scope, and step one will be I'm going to just get a decent saturation level. So something such as maybe 65 could be a good start. And then we'll go to the hue versus hue controls and rotate our hues around to get a result that I feel will work very well. What we're trying to do now is color calibrate the camera. So neutralize the color science so that it matches the standard on the color checker much better. And if you do this to all your cameras, you could save a lot of time by having them match much closely. So now we're going to go to the hue versus sat controls here. Okay, so now you can see that the various hues are lining up in the areas they're supposed to, and the skin tones fall roughly on the skin tone line. So everything's quite good here. Now, you might be inclined to think that we have created our LUT and now we can simply export it out. However, what I like to do is when I create my LUT, I'm going to remember the saturation value I used on the CC node here. So the saturation value was 65, but what I'm going to do first is I'm going to reset it to 50, which is the default, by double clicking the sat title there, sat field. So double click it, we're at 50. So we're removing the saturation adjustment that we did, and we're also going to disable the contrast node, which is the contrast node we added after the vlog curve that we pasted in, the curve that got us to Rec. 709. So with the contrast disabled and our saturation adjustments brought back down to the default, we're now going to right click the node itself, or right click the clip, and generate 3D LUT. I'm going to use a 65 point cube because it's just got more resolution, it's more precise. So just click on that, and now we're going to name this something like GH5 Vlog to 709 sunny day, and we're just going to say 01. Now I have set different white balances for different situations, so sunny day, cloudy day, and so this is C1. I'm naming it C1 because my custom white balance is number 1. So C1 and then 01. Alright, so now that we've saved that, let's go ahead and you see the LUT here. So I'm going to go ahead and fix the name up because Davinci Resolve likes to add the name of the clip at the end. Now what I'm also going to do is type in something like 65.00 sat. So this reminds me that 65 saturation is what the proper level is. So I'm going to copy that, Control C. I'm going to go to Project Settings, Color Management, and then open the LUT folder, and we're going to just make a folder called Tutorial, and then I'm going to paste the LUT in there, and then I'm going to update the lists, and now I'm going to save that. So here's some footage I shot on the Panasonic GH5 with the Vlog L color profile with the appropriate white balance set. That's very important to set the white balance correctly. Now I'm going to navigate to, in the LUTs page, I'm going to go to the tutorial folder that we created. So here's the LUT that we made, GH5 Vlog to 709 sunny day. I'm going to double click it, and you can see that the LUT gets applied to this node right here. Now I'm going to go and add the 65 saturation. Press Shift S to create a node that is prior to the node in front of us, so it's another serial node. And over here I can then use the offset wheel to control my exposure as I wish. So we're going to bring the exposure to about right here, which is fine. And then if I want to affect the temperature, I can too. So this is 10-bit footage, and so it has 4 times the color information as regular 8-bit video. So it's what I prefer to use. When shooting log profiles, I prefer to use the 10-bit video. So let's go over to this clip over here. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to double click on the footage. I'm going to add the appropriate amount of saturation, so 65. Press Shift S to create a new node. We're going to, prior to that node, we're going to affect the color temperature a little bit. And then I'm going to affect the exposure. And press Shift F to go full screen. And you can clearly see that the colors look very good. So I'm going to go over here to this clip here. You can see, well, this clip I like it a little bit better. They're both very similar though. I'm going to double click. And then same thing as before, we're going to add our saturation. You can add whatever saturation you want, but I'm going to add to 65. Press Shift S to generate a serial node prior to the node in front of it. So this is the node with the LUT. And then here in log space, we're still in log space over here, we can affect our offset, which is effectively our exposure. And then we can also affect color temperature if we wish. Now another thing you should notice is that if you do feel that this doesn't have enough contrast in it, there's nothing necessarily wrong with going to primaries wheels over here and changing it to log space. And maybe if you would like to, we can press Shift S again to generate another node prior to that one. And we can affect maybe our shadows, maybe our highlights. Maybe we can add a little bit of contrast. And we can press Shift D, or I'm sorry, Shift F to go full screen, and then Control D to see the effect of that. So if you want to affect your, colors more, you can, of course. And this is not necessarily the final look you're trying to go for. This is a very good standard look that is very color accurate out of the camera. And then you can apply whatever creative looks you'd like. So Shift D to go back to the original, and Shift D to see the final look. Alright, so let's look at this clip now. I'm just going to double click on our LUT and apply it. Now you can see that LUT was made for a sunny day. And so our color temperature is quite off because I set my color temperature on this shot for a cloudy day. Now ideally you want to make several LUTs, one for a cloudy day, a sunny day, and you can do this with drones as well and GoPros. Using native white balance on the GoPro is what I recommend. But you can make these LUTs for all of your cameras. However, in this case, because we're shooting with 10-bit video on the Panasonic GH5, I can affect my white balance in post quite well. But first I'm going to add my saturation, so saturation 65. I'm going to press Shift S to add a serial node prior to the LUT. And now I'm just going to affect my color temperature and bring it into alignment. So there it is. You could have affected this with normal Rec 709 footage or normal 8-bit video too. It would have been fine. Now what you can also do is then in this node right here, you can affect your offset. And then you can in log space bring down your highlights if you wish. So there you go. This is before and this is after. And if you think the shadows are, too bright, you can always bring down the shadows in log space. So it's not really a big deal. You can do whatever you wish once you understand the concepts. Alright, so let's look at this clip here. Now this is of Mount Shasta in California. Now keep in mind that I'm recording through a windshield, so I do have a dedicated white balance setting on the GH5 for being through the windshield here. So I've actually created a different LUT that is a Vlog Ultra Rec 709 sunny day with the windshield tint applied. So the procedure is the same. It's just that I set the white balance on the camera according to the tint of the light coming through the windshield. So now I'm able to do the same thing as before. This one, it's 65 saturation so I said that 65 is probably the appropriate saturation. Shift S will create a node prior to it, and then I can affect things like the offset, which will affect the exposure. So let me go ahead and mute this. Let's take a look. And again, the best thing about log footage is if your colors or if your exposure is a bit off, you can always affect the offset and adjust exposure in post, however you wish. Alright, so on this clip here, you might notice that I am aiming through the window, aiming through the windshield here. Now, I've already set a proper white balance with the color checker, allowing the light to come through the windshield and hit, on a sunny day, hit the color balance portion of the color checker. And then I set my white balance, and I save that. So I've also created a dedicated LUT for that particular white balance. So I'm going to double click that LUT, and you can see it's applied here. I'm going to add the appropriate amount of saturation, or the recommended amount that I've made in the LUT. I'm going to press Shift S to then generate a node, a serial node prior to this LUT. And if I want to, I can affect my color temperature. I can also affect my exposure with the offset. And now you can see this is log footage and this is after. This would be a really good start for grading and editing. But as you can see, the colors are quite accurate. And also keep in mind that by setting the white balance, I was able to neutralize the color shift from the ND filter. So with that, that's everything I wanted to cover in this video, and I hope it makes sense. There's quite a lot to this topic, but this is just a general idea of how to calibrate a camera and get the colors to line up more appropriately to real life, and then also to bring the log color into more of an appropriate Rec 709 color space. And if you apply these techniques to all of your cameras, you can match your colors much better and still be able to maintain the dynamic range in log footage when you use it. So I hope this helped out, and thanks for watching.